Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you with another APUSH video. Today we're taking a look at topic 7.2. This is our second video on this section, and it's continuing to take a look at debates focusing in on imperialism. And, when we talk about imperialism, we tend to think of, maybe starting in the 1890s up to about World War I, something along those lines. But in many respects, the foundation for what we kind of understand as the American imperialist era dates to the actions of this man that you see here on the left. This is William Seward. This is going to be the United States Secretary of State during the 1860s, during the Lincoln and Andrew Johnson presidencies, respectively. And, his actions, once again, are going to have a significant impact in kind of laying that groundwork for what we will eventually call the era or age of American imperialism. And he is associated famously with the purchase of Alaska. When we talk about, Alaska, it is once again another example of, the new frontier for America. And, even though it's not physically connected to the United States, there's a sense that, Alaska, it can be another refuge for the United States. But note, despite the fact that Alaska today is seen as an amazing purchase that we make from the Russians for, pennies per acre, basically. At the time, Seward's going to get ridiculed for this. Critics are going to call this $7.2 million purchase Seward's folly. Some are going to nickname, Alaska Seward's icebox, this is, the Russians swindled our boy Seward out of millions of American taxpayer dollars. But in reality, though I don't know if Seward's going to really live to see the much of the extent of the significance of gaining Alaska. We think of Alaska today, it's abundant natural resources, everything from, timber, to gold, to oil, that's going to be cultivated out of it. Once again, it's going to be, one of the greatest land deals in American history, maybe only outdone by the Louisiana Purchase. So understand Seward's going to be playing a critical role in that respect. But note, it's not going to be just that. Understand also that, Seward's going to be playing a critical role in other areas regarding expanding the United States' presence into the Pacific and into Central America. If you take a look at this map here, obviously here's Alaska up here in the far northwestern part of North America. But also take a look out here. Very small island that's going to be purchased by the United States that's going to be dubbed Midway. Obviously, you can kind of see, why it's given that title. But that's, the first footprint the United States is going to be, making in a significant way out in the Pacific, but certainly not the last. And in fact, for those of you that are World War II buffs, Midway is going to be a pivotal turning point battle for the Allies in the Pacific in that conflict. But also, though, if you look over here, and I know it might be a little hard to see, but if you look at where my cursor is on the map, you can see the tiny, well, I don't know how tiny, but, the relatively small nation of Nicaragua. Now, we had mentioned previously that one of the goals of France and Britain and also the United States, given that it's kind of in our neck of the woods, was to create a canal route to connect the Atlantic to the Pacific. And note, initially, the United States, the best that we can kind of get in terms of getting in on that is striking a deal to kind of, make sure nobody builds a canal on it. But Seward in the 1860s is going to be able to get a deal done so that if a canal is going to get built in Nicaragua, which was certainly a possibility, given the fact that there's a large lake in the middle of that country that can be utilized, the United States is going to have the rights to that. So, Seward, is going to be playing a pivotal role in kind of laying that groundwork for what America's footprint is going to be in terms of American imperialism for sure. But note also that the United States is going to be very desirous of another area in the Pacific, and that is going to be Hawaii. Now, with regards to American, relations, or the story of how America gets into the American fold, we have to understand that, it's all of these factors that we've mentioned previously that are going to be significant. A desire to have more money, a desire to have a military footprint, a desire to spread waspish values. All those things are going to be coming to a head when we do talk about, how Hawaii comes into the United States' possession. In fact, the United States will have an early cultural influence in the Hawaiian Islands, dating back to the 1820s. So, this is going back a long, long way. Christian missionaries setting up churches, trying to convert the native Hawaiian population. And they will be very successful. Over the next several decades, you're going to be seeing Hawaiian native culture embracing a lot of American culture, becoming Christian, eventually adopting, Western, Victorian-style attire, some learning to speak English. So this is certainly going to be embraced over time. Now, that being said, in addition to the Christian missionaries that are coming to the Hawaiian Islands, you're also going to be seeing a lot of folks making money in Hawaii, including guys like this guy on the left, Sanford Dole. And yes, it's that Dole, like Dole pineapples, all right? Dole is going to be a major player economically in the Hawaiian Islands, and he will be the leader of a, well, for lack of a better term, a business cabal, if you will, in the in Hawaii, made up of Americans that wanted to have more and more influence and control over Hawaiian politics. And to some degree, they had had some success, but in the 1890s, there's going to be a new sheriff in town, for lack of a better term, and her name is Queen Liliuokalani, pictured right here below. Queen Lil, as she's going to be commonly called, is going to be challenging this growing influence of Americans economically and culturally, having seemingly more and more control, if not dominance, in the Hawaiian Islands. She's going to be desirous of trying to create a Hawaii for the Hawaiians. So the idea being is trying to maintain that sovereignty, not just on paper, but in reality. Well, this is not going to do for folks like Sanford Dole that, want to have that control, to want to have the ability to dictate what's going to be happening both politically and economically in the islands. And it's not going to take long for those business interests to organize a revolution, a revolt against Queen Lil's rule. And, well, it's going to be successful. In 1893, Queen Lil is going to get booted out of office. And as you would probably imagine, these folks that are now going to be controlling Hawaii, which are now American businessmen, are going to be quickly desiring to have the United States annex it. But that's going to be a little tricky because the President of the United States at the time, Grover Cleveland, did not like how this went down. He thought it was a little too messy, a little bit too over the top in terms of, pretty crass, deposing of a legitimate native leader. Pretty much a pretty, blatant power grab, if you will. And so Cleveland's going to, try to put the kibosh on that for a few years, and he'll be successful. But his replacement, William McKinley from Ohio, is going to be very much in support of American imperialism. Not quite as much maybe as his successor Teddy Roosevelt, but certainly way more than Grover Cleveland. And once again, if you're talking about this is a prime location to expand America's global economic footprint, McKinley, a big fan, big supporter of American business, and business leaders loved him. This was an easy thing to take care of. So in 1898, we're going to be seeing McKinley greenlighting the formal annexation of Hawaii into the United States. So that's the story of how we get into Hawaii. But note, there's some other important things to consider when we talk about the role of American imperialism. For example, as we get more and more to the end of the 1800s, you're going to see the United States, flexing more muscle throughout the Western Hemisphere. And remember, when we talk about the Western Hemisphere, we're talking about all of North and South America, stretching from Canada through Central America, like, you know, Costa Rica, Panama, and all the way down into South America, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Venezuela. And speaking of Venezuela, in 1895, the United States is going to be, brought in to deal with a border dispute between the British government, which controlled a colony here, which is called British Guiana, and Venezuela to the west. Now, this diagonal region here shaded is going to be a disputed region between the two sides. And note, Grover Cleveland, as president in 1895, is going to assert America's role in this because, remember, this is part of the Monroe Doctrine. Remember, going all the way back to the 1820s, the United States is going to assert that, at least on paper, the United States has a legitimate right to look after the interests of the Western Hemisphere. It's going to be the protector, the bodyguard, if you will. And especially with regards to the idea of, if there's colonies that have been lost by Europe, that they don't come back. So the United States is going to say, if something's going to be going down as some sort of a beef between a European power like Britain and a Western Hemisphere power like Venezuela, the United States is going to be, coming in to, have a say in this. And the United States is going to basically serve as the arbiter in this conflict. And it's going to take a couple years, but eventually, as you can kind of see here, Britain's going to get the lion's share of that territory. It's going to go on to become the country of Guyana. But despite that, the United States is going to be sending a message that, hey, we are going to be playing a role in this. And note, different from the 1820s, where in the 1820s, it was really all talk, no action, because we couldn't back up any of these assertions, and it only had any credibility because the British Navy was willing to kind of back it up. But now, by the time we get to the late 1800s, we actually do have more of a military of some significance, and we can actually back up what we're saying. We can actually walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And, once again, showing this idea of American leadership in the region. A few years earlier, before the Venezuela border dispute, we're going to be seeing the United States hosting what's going to be called the First Pan-American Conference in 1889. That the United States is going to be trying to make a message, trying to send a message that, we as countries in the Western Hemisphere, we have shared concerns politically, but also a ton of shared interests economically. And the United States is going to be, once again, exerting that leadership via the Monroe Doctrine, but also in reality, the fact that we're a tremendous economic power by this point, to, kind of bring together this strong relationship. And even though on paper it's going to be looking like, the United States is going to be one of, an equal with all of these other countries at the table, the reality is going to be that, the United States is going to be the first, if you will, amongst equals, that we're really going to be dominating this relationship. And for some of these countries, it will have some degree of benefit to allow them to be protected from, European, dominance. But as we'll go on, there's also going to be over time a growing sense of resentment by many of our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere as the United States kind of being a bully, a domineering big brother, if you will, something along those lines. So anyhow, that being said, we're going to end it here on this video. We got one more video that's going to be taking a look at criticisms of American imperialism. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.